Hello and welcome back to Afterglow, episode 60. And in today's episode, we're going to be looking back to the NES again at Contra, which this game, at least in my little community, was huge. I didn't get into it at the same time everyone else did. I was kind of busy playing other stuff at the time. I don't know if you guys listened to the RoboCop episode, but around the time where everyone was loving Contra, I was really getting into RoboCop. What a strange choice. I know a lot of you must be thinking, but I really enjoyed RoboCop. And Contra I thought was alright, kind of difficult, but eventually I did get my hands on my own copy, and that's when I really got into it. So apparently it took me actually owning it to get into it instead of borrowing it. But we're going to go into all of that after our music cut. Welcome back, and I hope you're ready for an interesting take on Contra for the NES. I felt this is a game that you have to learn. A lot of people claim it's like NES difficult. I don't think it's actually that hard these days, although I used to. So going way back when, like I said, I was playing more RoboCop, and a lot of my buddies were getting into Contra, and I tried it, and I'm here like, yeah, it's a cool shooter. It's kind of difficult, but it's pretty cool, and I went back to RoboCop. That's the game I always rented. They were into Contra. I think I played it. I beat the first, two levels, and then I would struggle on the waterfall. I could sometimes get through the waterfall level, and then after that, I could easily beat the fourth level. Just so you know, levels 2 and 4 are these... they're not first person, I can't really call them behind the shoulder, but more or less your player is looking down the hallway and shooting down the hallway. And I could always get through those levels easily, but then I would usually die in that fifth level. So that was it for me for a while. Time goes on, and of course, you've all heard the story about the rental store that sold a bunch of their NES games I got a huge amount of my collection from. They had Contra there for, like, dirt cheap, like $1. So, of course, I picked it up. And I started to get into it and learn the game a little bit. For one, there are a bunch of power-ups. There is an R power-up. Now I know it's for rapid fire, but I'll be honest with you, I couldn't tell the difference between when I picked it up and when I didn't. I had no clue what R did in that game. So now I know it's supposedly rapid fire. I'll pick it up if it's convenient, but if there's enemies in the way and it's going to be risky to pick it up, I won't even mess with it. The game also has a huge amount of guns for an NES game. You got your regular gun, you got your machine gun, you got your laser, you got your flamethrower, and then you got your spread shot. One thing that you have to learn is, as a younger player, you'll experiment with all these guns, and then you'll realize that there is only one gun. That is the spread shot. It just annihilates everything in its path. Whereas the other guns, they can be useful at times, but anything that they can do, the spread shot can normally do better. So more or less, you look for the S, and you keep that as your main power-up. If you do not have any power-up at all, you can go with the machine gun. I usually stay away from the laser altogether. I'd rather have the default gun than the laser, just because it's powerful, but it's so slow when it comes to firing. And whenever you try to rapid fire it, your projectile disappears and it respawns at your gun point. So you can't really rapid fire it. It just continually just stays right in front of you, which isn't really a good thing in this game because you've got enemies all over the place raining fire on you. So, lesson learned, stick with that spread gun. So eventually I found out that the Konami code does indeed work for this game. Now the first game that I learned worked with the Konami code was Turtles 2, the arcade game. But this one works with it, and it gives you 30 lives, which sounds awesome. Yeah, you can easily beat the game with 30 lives if you learn a little bit. And you can, absolutely. Once you have that 30 life code, this game is really no problem to beat. But I don't recommend you use it as a crutch. Using the 30 life code over and over and over again, yeah, you can run through the game eventually, but it creates bad habits as well. There'll be areas of the game that you can get through with, some skill, some smart shooting, some smart maneuvering. With that 30 life code, it's like, I got 30 lives, I can take a death and then run through it. Especially in the factory level that has like the flamethrowers and everything. It's so easy to fall into the temptation of just trying to run through it, and if I die, I got like 25 lives left. I can just, pull through it with invincibility and keep going. That's a perfect time frame, by the way, for the "you are close" thing from secret levels. Invisibility. But, yeah, it creates the bad habit of you wanting to just power through and steamroll through the game. And yeah, you can be it that way. But if you take the time to learn the game mechanics, you can run through this game with 3 lives, no problem. The game is actually very, very generous to give out extra lives as well. Whenever your score hits certain points, you're awarded with an extra life. You can easily, by the time you get to level 3, at least have 1 extra life on top of your original stock. So, you can handle the occasional cheap death. In my opinion, at least, you're really ruining the game if you use that 30 life code more than like 5 or 10 times to beat the game. Because you can use it to learn those later levels, but afterwards, you're just using it as a crutch whenever you should be able to run through this game default no problem. It is a difficult game only when you don't know what's coming. The patterns and everything are pretty similar across all the enemies, so once you learn that, the game is easily beatable. It's not a cakewalk by any means, but it's definitely beatable for anyone of any real skill level, in my opinion at least. Doesn't take away from the fact it is an incredibly fun game. One of my favorites for the NES these days. I definitely see what my friends saw in it. It just took me quite a bit longer. Now, the Japanese version I played later on as I got an emulation. You got some like extra cutscenes and stuff with it, along with some extra animation too. Like the jungle, you can see the leaves blowing in the trees, whereas we didn't get that over here in America, which I think that was a cool touch. So if you're try this game out and you decide that, you're really into it, check out the Japanese version. I love the extra graphics behind it, the extra sprites that are thrown in. Honestly, playing it in Japanese is not difficult. We're here for the action. We all know the story of Contra. Go into island, blow up bad guys. As you get further, big shock, they're aliens. Blow up more aliens, beat the game. But definitely give that Japanese version a try, and don't use the 30 life code as a crutch. You can do it. You can easily beat this game on the stock lives. You just gotta take the time to learn those later levels. There's a reason why after, playing the game for a day or two, you can burn through the first, 3 or 4 levels. It's because you've learned them. And you can use the 30 life code to learn those later levels, but after that, give it a try without them, and I guarantee you'll get further than what you thought you could. And I've heard so many people just use that 30 life code just as a crutch. Oh, the game's unbeatable without it. No, no, you can do it. Game is eminently beatable without that code. Use it as a tool, not as a crutch. That's all I can really say about it. But this game absolutely turned me into a fan of the Contra series. I managed to borrow Contra 3 from a buddy and really loved it. To me, that is actually significantly more difficult than Contra NES. Now, I'm probably being a hypocrite there because once you learn the patterns, I'm sure you can beat it too. For some reason, the patterns in that game were just harder for me to learn. No clue why. And another reason why it makes me a hypocrite coming up, I got Contra 4 for the DS. And I could actually beat that game eventually, but I tore into that game and had a blast. And of course, an unlockable in that game was the NES Contra games. So I got to replay those old games on the DS through that game, which I think is an awesome touch. And I believe that was the last time I actually sat down and replayed NES Contra, but I need to go back and give it another try. And if you haven't played it yet, you need to go back and give it another try as well. But that's going to be it for my ramblings and memories of Contra. Hope you've enjoyed. We're going to listen to some more music before we go over the outro. Alright, thank you once again for listening to this episode of Afterglow. If you like what you listen to, check out the show notes. There's a Discord. You can come in, hang out with me and a few other people who happen to listen. It's slowly growing every day. Like I said, well, not every day. Let's be realistic. Every couple weeks, we might get a new member who will drop in and say hi. But I appreciate everyone who's joined so far. Hope we get more in there. If you'd like to support the show, you can pay $1 a month on Patreon through the Patreon link below. Whenever you do that, you'll get a shout out at the end of every episode. Friends of the show include Retro Gaming Roundup, which is one of the longest running retro video game podcasts out there today. Secret Levels, they push more on the comedy side, but they're awesome to listen to. They cover one game per episode. The Lost and Gone podcast with Grim. He normally covers Lost and Forgotten Media. He was actually on the previous episode of Afterglow where he covered Resident Evil on the PlayStation 1 with me. So if you haven't listened to that yet, be sure to go back and check that out. That was a fantastic episode. He was awesome. Like, honestly, every time there's a special guest in this show, they're always awesome. Maybe it's me that holds the show down. But speaking of my show, our logo and artwork is done by TobyVonDoom from Secret Levels, and the music intro and outro is done by Grim from the Lost and Gone podcast. Thank you for taking time out of your day to listen to my retro game ramblings. I'll see you on the next episode of Afterglow.